Hello, my friends. Welcome to Lindy's Magpie Reads. If you're new here, I'm Lindy. I read a lot, and I am currently on the tail end of recovery from a brain injury. So I have a happy report about my vision therapy, which has come to an end. I was evaluated last week by the neurooptometrist who compared my results from tests that they did at the beginning of September and then until now. And so, for example, the tracking exercise, what took me 42 seconds back in September, I can now do in 16 seconds, which I do feel like I'm doing a lot better, but it's nice to have that recorded as, yes, the numbers have really improved. And Dr. McCrowden said he believes that I will continue to improve on my own with better visualization and so on without further vision therapy. So, yay. Last week, I went to an event with Margaret Atwood in conversation with Carol Off. And I was given tickets to this, so I went with my friend Kathy. It was held in Vancouver, which requires a ferry trip from Victoria over there. Stayed overnight at Kathy's, came back the next day. And it was just great. Margaret Atwood is now 86 years old, so I don't know how much more opportunity we will have to hear her live. I'm going to talk more about her memoir in just a bit. That was mainly what she was talking about in this conversation on stage. Oh, it was held at the Orpheum. I'd never been into that theater before. It's huge and lavish, but they had a giant screen above. It didn't matter how far back you were in the audience because you could see all the expressions and everything blown up on the big screen. And I loved that there were so many younger people there. So most book events that I go to are women my age, and this was a mixed crowd. There were men there and a lot of young people, saying young, anybody in their 30s and up to me, young people. And on the big screen, they had photos that are in the memoir. They also had quotes from the book and other pictures, other photos from the photo shoot that they used for the cover of the book. See no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil images from the cover. Just kind of cool. I watched a video recently from Ben of Ben Reads Books, and he was talking about reading books from his local library. So that prompted me to mention that I mostly read books from the library. There's my stack of books still to be read. I've got a stack that's going back to the library today, including a few that I'm going to be telling you about. And there's more waiting for me there. I read a lot. I decided to scroll back through Storygraph and count how many I read from the library compared to how many are from my own shelves. And I went as far back as April of 2025, and I counted 200 from the library. This is both the physical books and digital, so mostly digital audiobooks, but also I like to read digital comics from the library. And compared to those 200, There were 25 that were from other sources, so mostly from my own shelves, but there were also a couple that were gifts from authors, one from publicist. One was a gift from the booktuber, my friend Maya of Maryland, Maya Mendoza. And one was from a friend's bookshelf. I want to mention that I am intentional in my purchases of books. I want to support small publishers and independent bookstores and local authors. So all 7 of the books that I'm going to be telling you about today, I borrowed from my public library. So back to Book of Lives. I listened to the audiobook and it is read by the author. So Margaret Atwood has a distinctive voice and lots of people don't like it. I actually enjoy hearing her read aloud, and I also enjoyed hearing her humor. Sometimes she even chuckled a bit. She has lots of funny anecdotes to recount in here. She's published over 50 books of all kinds. So she's really the grand dame of Canadian literature. In this book, she says, "I owe my existence to a large green caterpillar." She talks about her father, who was an entomologist, and her parents are both from Nova Scotia. And she grew up mostly in the woods, where her father was employed as an entomologist in northern Quebec and northern Ontario. In this memoir, she points out where she got the characters and ideas from for many of her books. So that's kind of fun. But I think what I got the most out of this book is her depiction of Canadian publishing from its infancy onwards. So she writes that she was told, if you want to be a writer, you must leave Canada and go to London or Paris or New York, because there's no such thing as Canadian literature and Canadian writing. So there's all of these names of people that I know of, but they were her friends and contemporaries, like Dennis Lee and Robertson Davies, Margaret Lawrence, Marian Engel, Gwendolyn McEwen. She actually quotes a line from Gwendolyn McEwen's poem, Dark Pines Underwater. "There is something down there and you want it told." And that's my favorite Gwendolyn McEwen poem. She talks about Alice Munro, Al Purdy, Milton Acorn, Michael Ondaatje, the House of Anansi Press, and what it was like before there were book tours. So she says these were instigated by Jack McClelland, who was at McClelland and Stewart, was a very prestigious Canadian publishing house, which is now owned by Penguin Random House. She says before there were literary festivals, and she talks about how they began in the 1970s in Toronto with the Harbourfront reading series, and how the paperback changed the publishing model in the 1950s. She writes, "You published the hardback, possibly at a loss. Then you sold paperback rights and recouped your initial outlay. But as Canada did not have paperback houses, their publishers couldn't do that. The new paperback houses, Pocket Books and Penguin, were owned in the States and in Britain, respectively. So Canadian books appeared in hardback and then disappeared. They didn't live on as cheap reprints. She writes that in the States, the beats were making themselves felt, but in Canada in the 1950s, if you wrote poetry, you weren't liable to be branded as either a commie subversive or, by the ultra-left, as a capitalist stooge. Instead, you were likely regarded as a harmless lunatic, or worse, as ridiculous. That is, if you were regarded at all. Nevertheless, I embarked upon poetry. I don't know why, but I do know when. So her book of a collection of poetry, The Circle Game, won the Governor General Award in 1966. And she designed her own cover. She said she used lettre set for the title and the red dots that lawyers use to mark where you need to sign their papers to make the spiral design on the front. And she also said when the Governor General presented her with the award, he said to her, "I haven't read your book and I don't intend to." She does quote one of her poetry lines that's one that I think is the most famous. "You fit into me like a hook into an eye, a fish hook, an open eye." She talks about the time Rick Mercer got her to dress up as a hockey goalie, and that lives on the internet. I will link to YouTube of that. And she talks about the other differences between Canadians and Americans. So she gives the example of a conversation she had with the author E.L. Doctorow. He said, "They didn't like my book in Canada." And Atwood said, "They loved your book in Canada." And Doctorow said, "How could you tell?" So this is her quote. "I often had to explain to Americans that the Canadian equivalent of terrific, unsurpassed, genius, best thing since sliced bread, next door to God is not bad. If it's really good, then not bad at all." If you want more about the differences between Canadian culture and American culture, I recommend following Todd Maffin. I will link his YouTube channel down below. He's your emotional support Canadian. Lots of fun. So Margaret Atwood and her longtime partner, Graham Gibson, worked together to start the Writers' Union of Canada. And the kinds of things that they worked for included a public lending right, which is why now in Canada, authors who have their books in the public library get paid for use of their work. They worked on the development of a standard minimum author contract and a lot of work to rectify the almost complete absence of Canadian writing in schools. She says, "Then as now, many thought writers shouldn't be paid since they enjoyed what they were doing. So bank president, you like your job? Then no money for you." There's so much more that I could share about this memoir. I am going to leave you to discover all of the joys in there. So, in addition to all of the books in this video being from the public library, they are all by Canadian authors. My friend Jolene over at Bookworm Adventure Girl has put out a Read Across Canada Challenge for 2025. And it is in Storygraph, or you can find a link to it on her channel. I will have her channel in the program notes here. But there's only one out of 25 categories that I have not completed, and that is a Canadian book published 25 years before you were born. So in my case, that is 1935. And as I was just telling you, covered in Margaret Atwood's memoir, there just wasn't a lot, nothing much to choose from. I'll give you some examples. There's a book called Jean Valjean that is a novel by Solomon Cleaver. He was a young minister from Winnipeg who often retold Victor Hugo's book Les Miserables in his own words. And so this is around the turn of the 20th century. And he was encouraged to write it into a book form. The resulting novel is less than a tenth of the original. Doesn't appeal to me to read it in at all. Then there are a couple of books by Grey Owl, who is an English-born Canadian trapper turned conservationist. But yes, he went by Grey Owl and dressed up as if he was Indigenous. The two books, here they are. The Adventures of Sejo and Her Beaver People. Now, and the other book is an adult novel written in the voice of an Indigenous man who becomes a writer, and it makes it seem as if this is an autobiographical novel. Pilgrims of the Wild. No, just no. Then there's a historical novel called The Great Divide by Alan Sullivan. It depicts the construction of the Great Canadian Railway. Was well received by critics. Does not interest me at all. So the book that I had chose for this challenge is one by L.M. Montgomery, the author of Anne of Green Gables. The one that was published in 1935 is Mistress Pat, and this is a sequel to her book, Pat of Silverbush, which I have not read. And I wasn't able to locate a copy of Mistress Pat that was easy for me to access. So this prompt has fallen by the wayside for me, and I don't feel like I need to read it just so that I can check off something on a reading challenge list. And I did read another book by Lucy Maud Montgomery this year, and it was for a different category in the Reading Across Canada Challenge. It was Read a Canadian Classic. The book I read was The Blue Castle. That came out in 1926, so almost 100 years ago. And I was so wrapped up in reading it that I missed my online book club. Just reading and forgot completely that I was supposed to log in to book club. The Blue Castle, by the way, is available from the Project Gutenberg, free online. Another category in Jolene's Reading Across Canada Challenge is a book with a Canadian place name in the title. So this next one is, for that, Valentine in Montreal, and it's by Heather O'Neill. I listened to the audiobook. Now this was originally serialized weekly in the Montreal Gazette, and each episode features a different metro station. So the central character is Valentine, who's an orphan. She works at a dépanneur, a convenience store. Aspects of it reminded me of Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Muraka, although this plot is more of a madcap mystery adventure. I really like Heather O'Neill's style, so I'm going to read you a bit that I've transcribed. And this one is set at the Place des Arts Metro. This is a stop where you can see people dressed up as though they are aristocrats. They put on their very best clothes out of respect for the performing arts. They all gather in the square, and then there is a dinging noise. They rush inside and up the stairs. All the women hurry in their high heels and large fur coats. It makes them look top-heavy and yet elegant, like llamas scaling the sides of a mountain. Their happy voices sound like the gurgling of a chocolate fountain. And at another metro station, I can't remember which one this one is, she encounters an incident. The man is wearing a leather vest that is completely covered in metallic studs. He looks like something you would swing at the end of a stick during a medieval battle. His lady friend has blue hair, and her body is covered by tattoos of cute things, hearts and ponies, and strawberries with smiling faces. She looks like a toddler who got into the sticker drawer. A lot of Heather O'Neill's books feature orphans or young people who are neglected by their parents. And this next book is also about orphans, Tig by Heather Smith. I listened to the audiobook read by Joelle Peters. This won the Governor General Award for Young People's Literature this year. It's a middle grade novel, and Tig and her brother Peter were abandoned by their mother, and they managed to continue to live on their own for quite a while until the authorities figure this out. And they end up getting taken in by their uncle and his husband. And it is such a heartwarming example of unconditional love. Yeah, it's great. And I read another middle grade novel. I've actually got the book here. I Won't Feel This Way Forever. It's by Kim Spencer, who is from the Gitxaała First Nation. She lives in northwestern British Columbia. So this is actually a sequel to Weird Rules to Follow, which was a multi-honor and award-winning middle grade novel that was started in 1985, set in Prince Rupert. And the same girl, Mia, is I think 12 in this book. This is set in 1989, and her grandmother has cancer and is dying. And her grandmother was central to her extended family. Mia and her mother live with their grandmother, and so it's kind of the opposite of the orphan and neglected by parents situation that we had with Heather Smith's book and Heather O'Neill's book. Because it's set in 1989, the author has chosen to use outdated terms. So instead of Gitxaała, it's Tsimshian people in here. This is a very realistic novel. The emotions really come through. It just feels so true to life about that stage of transitions. Mia's estranged from her former best friend, the grief of losing her grandmother, and of getting older, moving into junior high school. I recommend this and the first one too, Weird Rules to Follow. There is Indigenous language from British Columbia in this next book as well, still by Joanna Cockerline, but the author herself is not Indigenous. This falls into the new to me author category in the Reading Across Canada Challenge. It is set in Kelowna, BC, so the interior of BC. It's a debut novel, and Joanna has experience as a long-time outreach worker for people who are living on the street. So we meet quite a large cast of unhoused people. The main character is Kayla, who is a sex worker who lives on the street, and her best friend, little Zoe, another sex worker, has disappeared. So through the novel, it's what happened to little Zoe, but there's also gradually revealed the backstory of Kayla and how she ended up there on the streets. We also meet a couple of the outreach workers, and this situation really interested me, but I found that the style of writing was not exactly to my taste, so I did skim a little, and I found myself wishing that this book had been written by Margaret Atwood because I wanted nuance. It's, like I said, personal taste, and a lot of people really love this. It did make the long list for the Giller Prize, so it definitely has critical acclaim. The Indigenous aspect in here is the Syilx people live in that area, and so one of the elders on the street, Gloria, takes Indigenous girls kind of under her wing and teaches them something of the language, the traditional medicines. They go up into the hills to gather things. She makes tea. So one of the expressions that I encountered in here, I won't try and say the Syilxan language version of it, but it translates as, "My heart is full with happiness." And I recognize that Monique Gray Smith, who is a Cree and Scottish writer here in Canada, did a picture book together with Julie Flett, who is Cree and Métis, and the title of the book is "My Heart Fills with Happiness." It's a fabulous book that you can get as a board book for very young children. Love it. Next, I want to tell you about one that fits the Reading Across Canada Challenge under Canadian Book in Translation. And I read Muybridge by Guy Delisle, and it's translated from French by Helge Dascher and Rob Aspinall. Guy Delisle was born in Quebec City, and he now lives in France. There is a set of Canadian postage stamps that features comic artists from Canada, and there's Guy Delisle. So this is a comics format biography of photographer Edward Muybridge. He was English, and he left England for America for adventure. And back in the 1870s in Sacramento, he took on a challenge from the railroad tycoon Leland Stanford, who I learned founded Stanford University. The challenge was to prove whether a horse's hooves ever leave the ground while galloping. And in the process, Muybridge unknowingly pioneered time-lapse photography, laying the foundation for motion pictures as we know them. Now, despite his groundbreaking discoveries, his life was marked by many tragedies, including a brain injury. He had to go back to England and be nursed by his mother for a few years. There's betrayal, intrigue, and murder. The book incorporates archival photos. Oh, the end papers are fantastic. There's this gallery of characters at the front, and in the back end papers, you see the lifespans of these characters. And I felt like I learned so much from this book. And I've got one final book to tell you about, and that is Danger Eagle by Jessie Wente, who is Anishnaabe. And the illustrations are by Shaikara David. She's Mohawk. She's a Mohawk artist. This is suitable for preschool to grade 2. There's quite a nod to films. Jessie Wente is known as a film critic. Stuffy discretion is advised. The stunts depicted and performed in this book should never be attempted by anyone, human, penguin, or stuffy. A long, long time ago, in the living room, a hero was unwrapped, or born. Born is better. A hero was born, a hero so fast, a hero so strong, a hero so brave that danger wasn't just their middle name, it was their first name. Introducing Danger Eagle. So this moves back and forth between fantasy and reality, and I love how it recognizes that children need to see themselves in all kinds of stories, not only stories that overtly deal with their ethnicity. So you see the children in here have brown skin. There's never anything about racism in it. There is bullying, but this is by a cousin rather than a classmate. And there's a strong message in here about believing in yourself. And it ends with a cliffhanger. What's next? And I'm going to leave you there. What's next for you? Thank you so much for watching. Always appreciate hearing from you. So please, let me know, have you read any of these books? Do you intend to read any? Are you a library user? Tell me all about it in the notes down below. I'll see you all soon in the next one. And in the meantime, happy reading, everybody. Bye for now.